When I was reading through the bill here, unlike the previous member who clearly hasn't, and looking at the notes, I said, well, anyone who wanted to refer to the detail would probably be as excited as someone sitting down and watching paint dry, Mr Speaker. For the most part, the changes brought in by this bill are quite technical. Most people would see them as logical and sensible, and that's indeed why the Labor opposition will be supporting the bill, Mr Speaker. But it does do a couple of other little things, and well, maybe the government thinks they're little, but actually they're quite significant. This brings in a new tax. This is from the party that, of course, said they were going to cut taxes, Mr Speaker. And from July the 1st, 2010, New Zealand Customs Service began applying an import transaction fee of $24.75 to a range of personal imports. I can remember back when I came back from Australia at the end of the 70s, or it might be right at the start of the 80s, and I bought a few presents for my family, and I remember being absolutely terrified because I didn't know the exact value and I didn't know whether I was going to have to pay a fee at customs when I came into the country or not. I think that this bill might reintroduce such a tax, because people will have to sit down, and if you read through it, generally the import transaction fee will apply to goods valued at over $400, but at times packages valued at less than $400 will attract a fee. Well, has the government been upfront about this? No, they haven't. This is a new tax that people going out to Australia for a holiday, buying something that might be around $400, they may have to end up paying an import transaction fee when they come back into the country. I thought we got all over. I thought we had finished with all of that bureaucracy. But no, the national government seems intent to reintroduce it. Now, I trust the Select Committee to address that. Mr Bridges, did you pick up on that fact? Have you told the good people of Tauranga when they, all the Blue Rinse Brigade up there in Tauranga, when they take their little trips in winter to Australia, will they be paying this fee when they come back? Well, we'll leave that to the Select Committee. Mr Speaker, as my learned colleagues have said, customs is a very, very important role in New Zealand. We are an island. Everyone who comes here by sea or plane, very few come by any other means. No submarines, no swimming. Most come by those two methods. Some row, yeah. Some row. The odd person, yes, and there has been the odd person kayak, of course. We have to acknowledge that huge task. They arrive at New Zealand, the first person they meet, the first Kiwi, is often a customs person. Now, they could have come on Air New Zealand, in which case their contact with New Zealand would have started when they hopped on the plane. Certainly not when they got through customs, if it's at LA, we hope. Their experience was a positive one when they hop on the Air New Zealand plane, or if they arrive at one of our airports. It is really important that our customs staff are well resourced, are competent, are friendly, because that's the face of this country, the first point of contact. And for the most part, they do an exceptional job. So the alignment of information between agencies is sensible. In fact, most people would say, why haven't you been doing it before now? And the complex web of legislation that we've had that has been hindered by privacy provisions and all the rest of it, then this bill addresses those issues, and that's great. So Labor will support it. But there are, a number of issues that will have to be addressed, such as that import transaction fee that is clearly laid out in the bill. And the National Party members have refused to acknowledge it. Oh, Mr Quinn hasn't read the bill either. Perhaps you should. Mr Quinn, pick the bill up and go through it and read it. Are you going to be on the Select Committee? No. Mr Bridges will. But can I tell the House, Mr Speaker, the most significant part of this bill, I have to say, is a little reference to the removal of customs and excise on people who generate and produce their own biofuel. And the government may laugh at that. They've overlooked it, made brief mention of it, but the minister did mention it once. This is actually the only visionary part of this whole piece of legislation. Labor does support it because anything that incentivises people to make more efficient use of energy or generate their own or biofuels is very smart. Not just for them, not just for New Zealand, but for the whole planet. And I commend the government for picking up an idea, no doubt laid down by the previous Labor government, I'm sure, that we should remove the custom and the excise on that. And there are, with emerging technologies, a number of opportunities in this area, particularly for farmers, for people in rural areas, that they will be able to produce their biofuels. Take, for example, the complex and difficult issue of housing of dairy cows. In Europe, as we see, many cows and animals are housed right through the winter. They have long, cold winters. In New Zealand, there is more of this emerging. And I believe over time that those farmers will capture much of the methane, they'll capture much of the effluent and start producing their own biofuel. And if they did have to pay excise on that, which is the current situation, then that would clearly be a disincentive. So this bill addresses that issue, and that's great. And so I commend the government for one little bit of vision. Mr Quinn, he's just got his eyes open enough just to see that opportunity. Mr Speaker, the other issue I must raise here, and the previous Speaker acknowledged the $74 million committed to the joint border management system, and that seems great. Can I just warn the government that there has been a record through INSIS, through Land Online, and no doubt through this new process here, of excessive necessary expenditure in complex technology projects. And there are indications that this total project will cost $200 million. Now, the question I have of a government that says they've got no money for anything other than tax cuts, of course, for their wealthy mates, and a bit of money to splash out around here and there, that will they commit the necessary funding to follow through and complete this project? Because if it ends up being half pregnant, if the $74 million is spent, we'll end up with some merging and sharing of information, but not the completion of the project that will lead to efficiency at the border. It is logical that we share information about people or goods coming in and out, between biosecurity, between MAF, between customs, because, Mr Speaker, we need to have the highest level of scrutiny and border control. This country is dependent upon biological systems. We need to make sure that people and goods coming in and out don't bring threats by way of biological agents, unwanted pests or organisms. The government cut 54 frontline staff from Biosecurity New Zealand 2 years ago, 54, and tried to pretend that they've maintained a high level of biosecurity at our border. Well, the Minister knows that's not true. And we will see, because I'll ask the Minister, how many incursions have occurred this year around biosecurity. And people will be amazed, because they occur on a regular basis, because we do not spend enough in biosecurity to guarantee our border protection. Well, Mr Speaker, if we have better alignment through this bill of the information shared between agencies, that's great. But if we don't have the commitment from the government, firstly to frontline services, cutting $2 million, cutting 54 jobs, that's what the national government did to biosecurity. If they're going to continue with that laissez-faire approach to biosecurity, then we will have a major incursion. This bill commits to better information sharing, but it is dependent upon a $200 million expenditure by the government. And if they're cutting back in other areas, Mr Speaker, I'm not convinced that they will have the good sense to commit the rest of the money to that project to make this work. Mr Speaker, this is generally a good piece of legislation, but it has some issues. It's around the potential for small-minded charges at the border, hassling people. It has issues around will a government commit the funding to follow